Every black belt in the dojo glanced down at her and smirked, unaware that the quiet girl before them carried a legacy that could silence them all. You? A black belt? Sneered one, his GI crisp, arrogance visible in every movement. Blonde hair tied neatly, Isla Harper's small frame seemed almost fragile, her eyes quietly observing the room. The students snickered, the adults exchanged amused glances, and even the instructor raised an eyebrow. What they didn't know was that Isla carried a legacy far heavier than their ridicule, a lineage of discipline, championship, and precision. One morning, one challenge, and one underestimated girl were about to silence an entire dojo in a way no one could have imagined. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. The gym smelled faintly of disinfectant and old mats. The midday light cut through tall windows, dust motes drifting lazily in the beams. The chatter of children filled the air, scattered bursts of laughter, squeaking sneakers, the dull thud of practice kicks on heavy bags. At the far end of the room, Isla Morton, 11 years old, stood in the white cotton folds of a fresh GI, her belt hanging loose at her waist. She had tied it herself, not carelessly, but without the flourish most instructors liked. Blonde hair tied into a low braid. Eyes down, feet bare and planted, she didn't fidget. That stillness was what drew their attention. 3 older students, boys in their early teens, all wearing black belts they'd earned here at Westbrook Martial Arts, stood near the wall, leaning against the mirrored panels. Evan, tall and broad for 14, crossed his arms and smirked. "Hey," he called across the mat. "Did you get lost on your way to ballet?" A couple of the younger kids snickered. Isla didn't move. Tyson, the shortest of the 3 but with the sharpest tongue, tilted his head. "Seriously, whose little sister is this? You can't just walk in and pretend to be in our class." Their instructor, Sensei Calder, a fit man in his late 40s with a calm but distracted demeanor, was busy adjusting a heavy bag strap at the far corner. He either didn't hear or chose not to step in. Isla finally looked up. Her gaze was steady, not defiant, just direct, but it was enough to make Tyson glance away for half a second before recomposing himself. Evan noticed. He grinned wider. "What belt are you?" "Oh wait, you don't have one." She had one, it just wasn't from here. The laughter from the boys wasn't cruel in volume, but in precision. They were circling socially, making sure others noticed. The younger students looked from Isla to the black belts and back, uncertain if this was supposed to be funny. Isla's hands stayed at her sides. She didn't touch the belt, didn't answer. Evan took a step closer, standing just within the unspoken ring of personal space on the mat. "If you're here to watch, there's a bench over there." He pointed toward the door, where parents sat scrolling through phones. The light shifted in the room as a cloud passed outside, dimming the space for a breath. Isla's braid swung slightly as she tilted her head. Her voice was quiet, almost lost in the ambient noise. "I'm here to train." Tyson laughed first. "Train? With us?" Isla didn't look at him. Her eyes flicked to the wall where a framed photograph hung, a black and white image of an older man in a GI, standing in a fighting stance. Calder's old teacher. She looked back at Evan, expression unreadable. He opened his mouth to push further, but something in her stillness made him pause, just for a beat. The pause was small, but it was the first crack. Sensei Calder clapped his hands once. "All right, pair up for warm-ups." The command broke the moment. Students moved, feet scuffing the mats, voices overlapping. Evan and Tyson drifted toward each other, and Liam, the third of their group, lanky and quiet, stayed behind a half-second too long before joining them. Isla waited, hands behind her back, until it was clear no one would invite her. Calder glanced her way. "You." He pointed briefly at Isla. "You can work with Maya." Maya, a soft-spoken girl around Isla's age with a yellow belt, gave an uncertain smile. They bowed to each other and began slow drills, stepping forward into basic punches. Isla's movements were deliberate, almost measured in a way that didn't match the beginner's energy around her. Evan watched from across the room as he half-heartedly mirrored Tyson's kicks. "She moves weird," he muttered. Tyson smirked. "Like she's in a movie." They didn't notice Calder glance at Isla once, then again. His expression didn't change, but his eyes tracked her foot placement, the way her back heel never lifted, the way her shoulders stayed level. Maya noticed too, but in a different way. "You're really good," she whispered in between strikes. Isla gave a tiny shake of her head. "Just practiced." When Calder called for partners to switch, Tyson didn't wait. "Hey, sensei, let me work with her." Calder hesitated for a fraction, but nodded. "Go easy." Tyson grinned. "Sure." They bowed. Tyson lunged forward into a clumsy but forceful punch. Isla slid her front foot back half an inch, just enough. His fist stopped short, the air between them shifting. He blinked. "Lucky." Second punch. She moved the same way, not leaning, not flinching. Her eyes stayed level with his, calm. Across the room, Evan was pretending not to watch, but his kicks had slowed. Third punch. Isla's hand moved for the first time, a smooth inside parry that redirected his arm without striking. Tyson's balance faltered. He caught himself, but not before a few students turned their heads at the stumble. "Careful, Tyson," Calder called, voice light but carrying. Tyson reset his stance, jaw tightening. "She's messing with me." Isla stepped back, bowing slightly. "I'm following the drill." That was when it happened, the subtle clue. As she bowed, the sleeve of her GI shifted just enough for the edge of a small, dark scar to show on her forearm. Straight, surgical, healed long ago. Not the kind of mark a playground fall would leave. Liam, standing nearby, caught sight of it. His brow furrowed. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered. The laughter from earlier didn't return right away. The drills shifted into light sparring. Calder moved between pairs, adjusting stances, correcting footwork. The sound of fists meeting padded hands filled the room in a steady rhythm. Isla waited at the edge until Calder gestured her back toward Maya. They bowed again. Maya bounced slightly on her feet. "You've trained before," she said under her breath, almost like it was a secret. Isla didn't confirm or deny. She simply moved forward, her steps whisper quiet on the mat. Each strike she delivered stopped just shy of contact. Precise, measured, almost like she was holding something back. When Calder passed by, he slowed for a second, studying the way Isla's rear hand never drifted from guard position. That kind of discipline didn't come from a week of practice. From the parents' bench, an older man with folded arms, Mr. Wexler, Maya's father, leaned forward slightly. He'd done enough years in the military to recognize a certain kind of training. His gaze narrowed, but he said nothing. Tyson and Evan whispered between their own rounds, but it lacked the earlier confidence. The first laugh was gone, replaced with something less certain. During a brief water break, Maya crouched to retie her belt. Isla stood a little apart, resting her hands behind her back. Her eyes drifted again to that framed photo on the wall, the old black and white one. The man in the picture had the same calm in his posture that she carried now. In her mind, she could still hear the voice, deep, deliberate. "You don't fight to prove something. You fight because you have no choice. And when you win, you don't celebrate, you bow." Her grandfather's words. She'd been 5 the first time he said them. The memory of him, standing in his own worn GI, was as clear now as it had been then. Calder called for the next round. Isla's eyes returned to the present. She stepped forward without hurry, ready to continue. Her calm was not the calm of someone new. It was the calm of someone who had been here before, many times, in many rooms, under many eyes, and knew that silence could be louder than anything else. In the mirror, Liam caught her reflection. He was starting to notice the little things. The way her GI sleeve stayed folded neatly even through movement. The way she stepped off the mat without looking down, as if her body already knew the boundaries. It wasn't beginner's luck. And now, even Tyson seemed to be watching her differently. Calder called for a final spar before the main session ended. The black belts paired with each other, yellow belts with yellow. That left Isla, standing in the center without a partner. Calder looked around, hesitating. "Evan," he called, "work with her." Evan's mouth twitched into a smirk, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He stepped forward. "Sure." They bowed. The first exchange was slow, deliberate. Evan threw a controlled front kick. Isla pivoted offline, catching his ankle lightly with her palm before stepping back in a stance. Not flashy, not showy, just correct. Second exchange, he pressed harder, a sharper jab. Isla's parry was minimal, using just enough motion to guide the strike away. Her eyes didn't break from his. By the third, Evan's jaw was set. He tried a combination: jab, cross, low kick. Islam moved through it like she'd rehearsed his sequence 1,000 times, ending in a perfect guard position, breath even. The gym noise dulled in her ears. For a moment, she wasn't in Westbrook martial arts. She was on the cracked concrete of her grandfather's backyard dojo, the air heavy with summer heat. His voice echoed in her mind, not loud, but certain. Every move you waste is an opening. Every breath you waste is a warning. Her grandfather had been more than a teacher. To most, he was just an old man with medals in a box. To her, he was the quiet wall between her and a world that hadn't been kind since her father never came back from deployment. She'd trained under him for 6 years. No belts, no trophies on display. Only discipline. Only the weight of his hands adjusting her stance, the nod when she got it right. Evan moved again, a feint this time. Isla didn't bite. She stepped just enough to close his angle, forcing him to stop mid-motion. For the first time, Evan didn't have a comeback. Calder clapped twice. Break. Evan stepped back, shaking his arms out. He glanced at Tyson as if to say she's better than she looks. Tyson didn't smile this time. Isla stepped off the mat, kneeling briefly to retie her belt. As she did, a pair of small, worn dog tags slipped from under her GI top, clinking softly before she tucked them back in. Only Liam, still sitting against the wall, noticed. His eyes followed her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to ask. She didn't see him looking. Her gaze had dropped to the mat, not in defeat, but in quiet remembrance. The weight she carried wasn't in her stance. It was in her silence. The class shifted into group drills, everyone in one long line, mirroring Calder's commands. Step forward, punch. Step forward, punch. The sound of bare feet hitting the mats echoed in unison. Isla took her place near the middle of the line. She didn't rush to match the other's rhythm. Her strikes landed with quiet precision, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be solid. From the parents' bench, Mr. Wexler was no longer leaning back. His elbows rested on his knees, eyes tracking Isla the way a soldier sizes up another soldier, searching for tells. The way she chambered her punches. The way her hip turned just enough. Calder noticed, too. His brow furrowed briefly, though he said nothing. Halfway down the line, Evan and Tyson still wore the thin smiles of boys trying to hold on to an earlier joke. But their glances toward Isla were more frequent now, less taunting, more watchful. Liam, working next to Isla, spoke without looking at her. Where'd you train before? Isla didn't answer immediately. Home, she said finally. That's not a dojo name, Liam said quietly. She didn't reply. Calder gave the next command. Step forward, block. Step forward, strike. The line moved as one, but Isla's blocks were tighter, her strikes shorter, no wasted movement. Tyson's gaze kept flicking toward her, irritation mixing with curiosity. When his form faltered on one block, Calder corrected him quickly, but Tyson glanced at Isla, as if her presence was the reason. From the far wall, Mrs. Jensen, a regular parent whose son had been here for 3 years, whispered to the woman next to her. She's not just starting. You can see it. Look at her shoulders. They don't even tense when he calls commands. The other woman frowned. She's tiny. Mrs. Jensen nodded slowly. Size isn't the point. The air in the room had shifted. Not fully. Not yet. But the easy dismissal from earlier was gone. Now there was something else moving under the surface. Isla, unaware, or appearing to be, kept her eyes forward, answering each command with the same deliberate pace. But in the mirror lining the wall, her gaze flicked once toward the framed photo again. The reflection caught it. Liam saw that too, and for some reason, it unsettled him. When Calder called a short break, most students reached for water bottles. Isla stayed on the mat, kneeling in the quiet space she had carved for herself. Her braid fell forward over her shoulder, but she didn't move to adjust it. She just sat. It wasn't the stillness of someone unsure what to do. It was the stillness of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and didn't need anyone's permission to do it. That was what made people start to look twice. The next drill was a partner exercise, defense against a straight punch. Calder paired students quickly. Isla found herself across from Liam. They bowed, and he hesitated for half a beat before stepping in with the prescribed attack. Isla's block was feather light, redirecting his arm without any clash of force. She stepped in just close enough to place her hand an inch from his chest, the strike, then stepped back into stance. Liam blinked. That's how they do it in the black belt class. She didn't react. It's how I was taught. From the next pair over, Evan kept glancing their way. His own block was sloppy enough for Tyson to mutter, "Focus." But neither boy was really focused anymore. At the edge of the mats, Mr. Wexler shifted his position, catching Calder's eye as he passed. "That girl," he said quietly, "she's not new." Calder didn't break stride. "We'll see." But when he stopped to observe Isla and Liam, his arms folded, not in judgment, but in study. She didn't fidget, didn't wait passively. She was ready before Liam even reset. On the next repetition, Liam's punch came faster, more realistic. Isla's block was still soft, but this time she stepped inside his reach, controlling his arm for a moment longer before letting go. There was nothing aggressive about it, but it had the unmistakable mark of someone who understood control, not just technique. Calder moved on without comment. The room's atmosphere had shifted into something more fragmented. Half the students were still wrapped up in their drills. The other half kept glancing toward Isla, some with quiet curiosity, others with the thin edge of irritation. Mrs. Jensen was openly watching her now. "She's not even breathing hard," she murmured to the other parent. Tyson noticed, too. After the round ended, he walked past Isla a little too close, muttering just loud enough, "Bet you can't do that against someone who's actually trying." Isla didn't answer. She only adjusted her belt, the knot sitting neatly at her waist. From the mirrors along the wall, her reflection caught something no one else noticed. Her left foot, sliding subtly into a balanced position even while standing at rest. It was a detail Mr. Wexler caught from the bench. His brows drew together, the corner of his mouth tightening in a way that hinted at recognition. The water break bell chimed again. Most kids clustered in twos and threes. Isla remained in her spot, eyes on the mat, quiet as ever. And yet, without a single word, she had begun to pull the gravity of the room toward her. Calder gathered everyone for kata practice, the long, choreographed patterns of strikes and blocks. The class spread across the mat in staggered rows. Isla took her place in the back, quietly watching Calder demonstrate the sequence. His movements were sharp but relaxed, each strike punctuated with a snap of the GI sleeve. When he called for the students to begin, Isla's form unfolded with an almost eerie familiarity, not matching Calder's exactly, but deeper. Her stances were lower, her transitions smoother, as if the kata lived in her bones instead of being memorized from instruction. Mr. Wexler's eyes never left her. "That's Okinawan," he murmured under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. "Not the sport version they teach here." In the third row, Liam kept stealing glances, his own kata faltering slightly as he tried to watch. Halfway through the sequence, Calder stopped the class to correct Tyson's elbow position. "You're dropping too soon," he said, demonstrating. Isla, still at rest, subtly adjusted her own stance to match the correction. Except hers didn't need correcting. As the class restarted, Isla's mind slipped for a moment into memory. It was winter in her grandfather's yard. The wooden deck slick with frost, the old pine tree casting long shadows across the training mat he'd laid down years ago. She was 8. Her breath puffed in small clouds as he guided her through the same kata, step by deliberate step. He'd never told her what it was called in the dojo sense, only its meaning. Every movement here is a choice. A choice to step forward. A choice to hold back. The world will always push you. You decide if you give ground. The sound of Calder's voice pulled her back. "Finish strong." "Kia!" the students shouted. Isla's voice was soft, but her strike landed in perfect alignment. As they bowed to finish, Tyson muttered to Evan, "She's been practicing this forever." Evan frowned. Then why's she here? Neither noticed Calder glancing at the dog tags that had slipped slightly into view again when Isla straightened. He looked away before anyone caught him looking. Mrs. Jensen shifted in her seat. "Who brings dog tags to a kid's karate class?" she whispered. Wexler didn't answer. His jaw had tightened. The air felt heavier now, not with hostility, but with questions no one was asking out loud. And in the center of it all, Isla stood in quiet stillness, her braid brushing her shoulder, her eyes down, but her posture unshakable. The kata ended, but Calder didn't dismiss the class immediately. He called for partner work again, slow sparring with controlled contact. The pairs spread out across the mat, but there was a ripple of hesitation when it came to Isla. Evan looked ready to volunteer, but Tyson spoke first. I'll do it. Calder's gaze rested on him for a beat longer than necessary. Controlled, he said flatly. They bowed. Tyson moved in with a simple jab-cross combination, the kind they'd practiced dozens of times. Isla's response was fluid. A slight slip, a soft parry, and then a perfectly placed counterstrike that stopped an inch from his torso. It wasn't forceful, but it was precise enough to make Tyson pause mid-motion. Again, he said. He came in faster. She still caught him, one hand intercepting his punch, the other controlling his balance. The class around them kept moving, but the noise seemed to thin out in that corner of the mat. Where'd you learn that? He asked, keeping his voice low. She didn't answer. He pressed. You didn't learn that here. The question hung for a moment before she finally spoke, voice quiet. No. From the parents' bench, Mr. Wexler's gaze sharpened. The tone in her voice, it wasn't defiance. It was memory. Calder called for a switch in partners. Tyson stepped back reluctantly, eyes narrowing. He didn't look satisfied, more unsettled. Liam took his place. They bowed, and he leaned in slightly. I saw your dog tags earlier, he said softly. She stayed focused on her stance. Are they yours? He asked. She hesitated. That hesitation was small, but it carried weight. They were his, she said finally. Liam didn't ask who he was, but he didn't have to. The moment broke when Calder clapped for everyone's attention. Circle up. The class obeyed, forming a wide ring around the center. Calder stepped into the middle. Black belts, you'll demonstrate combinations. Everyone else, watch and learn. Evan, Tyson, and Liam stepped forward. The three black belts faced the group, ready to show their sequences. But as they moved through the first demonstration, a strange thing happened. More eyes kept drifting toward Isla. Not because she was doing anything flashy. She wasn't even moving, but because she watched with the still intensity of someone studying for flaws. Her gaze wasn't critical. It was measuring. Calder noticed. So did Mr. Wexler. And then came the almost reveal. When Evan's kick landed slightly off balance, Calder started to correct him, but Isla's eyes flicked downward first, tracing the misstep, just as her grandfather had done to her countless times. For a moment, Calder's gaze locked with hers across the circle. No words, just a faint recognition in his eyes. And then he looked away. The room felt a shade different now, as if everyone sensed something, but no one could name it yet. The circle broke apart, students returning to the edge of the mats. Calder called for free sparring, controlled. Light contact. Respect your partner. Pairs formed quickly. Isla moved toward Maya again, but Tyson stepped in, blocking her path. Not this time, he said. You're with me. Calder glanced over, but didn't intervene. Maybe he wanted to see what would happen. They bowed. Tyson opened with a jab, testing. Isla blocked with minimal effort. He smirked and stepped in harder. A cross, a low kick, a hook. Each was deflected without any sound of impact. Evan called from the sidelines. Don't hold back, Tyson. Tyson's movements grew sharper, his feet heavier on the mat. Isla stayed quiet, like each step had been planned before he even thought to move. When Tyson's hook missed, he grinned in frustration. All right, let's make it interesting. Calder's voice cut across the mat. Tyson. Just his name, a warning. Tyson threw his hands up. What? I'm just saying. Let's see if she can really spar. The other students paused mid-drill, attention beginning to drift their way. Liam's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Isla kept her eyes on Tyson, voice even. We're sparring now. That's not sparring, he said. That's shadowboxing with an audience. Tyson, Calder said again more sharply. But Tyson pressed forward, not physically, but in the way he leaned into his words. What, you scared? You've been playing the quiet card all class, acting like you're too good for this. Isla didn't react to the insult. She simply adjusted her stance. Her grandfather's voice came to her again. People who try to pull you into a fight are already losing something. Don't rush to join them. The room was watching now. Even the parents were still, waiting. She looked Tyson in the eye and spoke just loud enough for Calder and everyone else to hear. If I spar you, you'll apologize when we're done. A murmur moved through the room. Tyson blinked, caught off guard by her condition. What? You'll apologize, she repeated, calm as before. Evan laughed once, short and sharp. Deal. Let's go. But Tyson didn't laugh. His smirk was back, but thinner now, as if he wasn't entirely sure what he'd just agreed to. Calder gave the smallest nod. Like contact, he said, but there was a different tone in his voice now, a weight that hadn't been there before. The room's air thickened. Everyone was watching. The mat felt smaller now, as if the room itself had shrunk around Isla and Tyson. Every student, every parent, every black belt in the room seemed to lean a little closer, caught in the gravity of the moment. Tyson adjusted his stance. He tried to look confident, but the smirk that had dominated the morning was gone. There was a new tension in his shoulders, a small hesitation in his weight distribution. Isla stood opposite him, braid brushing her GI, her hands relaxed but ready. She didn't move forward, didn't flare her nostrils, didn't make a sound. Yet somehow, every inch of her presence conveyed an unspoken command. I see you. I am ready. Calder's eyes swept over the mat, noting the change. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Remember, this is about control, precision, awareness. Tyson laughed nervously. Yeah, got it. But his movement betrayed him. Each step he took was measured, almost cautious, as if he sensed the room's collective anticipation. Liam whispered to Evan, "Do you feel that? Something's off." Evan's eyebrows knitted together. Yeah, like the air itself just got heavier. Isla shifted slightly, tiny, deliberate movements. Her weight centered, her back straight, shoulders relaxed. It was subtle, almost invisible, but those who knew to look could see the difference. Tyson lunged first, a quick combination of punches he hoped would surprise her. Isla absorbed the rhythm, parried each strike, letting his momentum carry him slightly off balance. The subtlety of her deflection revealed a depth of skill no one her age, perhaps no one in the room, could match. Tyson paused, blinking rapidly. He hadn't expected her to move like this. He felt exposed, vulnerable. You're fast, he muttered, trying to mask his unease. Isla's response was a quiet shift of stance, almost a whisper of motion, as though the air itself moved around her. Calder and Wexler exchanged a glance. Even they felt the subtle gravity, the recognition of discipline and history embedded in her movements. The room grew silent. Every student frozen, every parent leaning forward, anticipating the next motion. Time slowed. Isla's eyes briefly flicked to the dog tags at her collar, a faint acknowledgement of the legacy she carried. Then back to Tyson. You remember, she said softly. Apologize when this is done. Tyson's breath caught. He had no idea what he had just agreed to. Only that this girl, 11 years old, held a presence that demanded attention, demanded respect, demanded a reckoning he hadn't yet earned. The mat, once ordinary, now felt like the stage of an unspoken reckoning. The class waited. Calder's eyes lingered, quietly signaling, "Witness this." All at once, even the parents noticed, this wasn't sparring in the usual sense. This was something deeper, something disciplined, deliberate, almost ceremonial. And in that pause, that pregnant silence, everyone understood, the moment wasn't coming yet. But it would. The room seemed to contract around the mat. Sound fell away. The chatter of parents, the distant squeak of shoes against polished floors, even Calder's voice faded into the background. All that remained was the space between Isla and Tyson, a charged distance measured not in feet, but in awareness. Isla's braid swayed slightly as she shifted her weight, her toes gripping the mat like a dancer poised to strike a perfect balance. Her GI, crisp and white, was unwrinkled, almost ceremonial, her black belt tied neatly, the knot a silent testimony to years of discipline. Tyson's eyes flicked down for a moment, noting the subtle scars along her wrists, faint from previous training or misadventure, small, precise marks that hinted at a life more intense than a child of 11 should carry. He quickly looked back, as if not wanting to acknowledge the clues her body language offered. Her breathing was controlled. Even in stillness, she radiated a quiet power, the kind that had been honed in early mornings, in empty dojos, in the lingering shadow of her grandfather's teachings. Each muscle was relaxed but ready, coiled like a spring, holding in check a force she didn't need to display yet. Across the mat, Calder's attention had sharpened. He noticed the micro-adjustments, the way her weight shifted imperceptibly to counter Tyson's stance, the slight tensing of her shoulder blades, the faint narrowing of her eyes. Not aggression, not showmanship, precision. And he remembered the quiet discipline of her grandfather, legendary in local circuits, whose presence in a room always redefined the air around him. The parents leaned forward. One whispered to another, "Do you see that? She's different." The black belts around the mat stiffened, sharing glances that said, "Something is about to happen." The room collectively inhaled. Even Evan, usually brash, felt a tightening in his chest, a premonition he couldn't explain. Isla adjusted her stance once more, a subtle pivot that sent a ripple of awareness through Tyson. He tried to maintain his posture, a mixture of bravado and nerves, but the confidence he wore like armor began to feel thin. She raised her eyes to meet his, steady, calm, unyielding. There was no challenge in them, no anger, no need to prove herself. Only readiness, only quiet resolve. A bead of sweat ran down Tyson's temple. He could feel it. This was no ordinary sparring session. Something in her presence shifted the gravity of the room. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed duller, as if dimming to honor the silent tension. Calder stepped back, lowering his hands, letting the moment breathe. Time slowed. Every second stretched, emphasizing anticipation. The tiniest movement, a foot adjusting, a fist tilting, a finger flexing, became monumental. From the back of the room, Liam whispered, almost to himself, "She's like her grandfather." Isla tilted her head slightly, a tiny motion that suggested acknowledgement of history without need for words. This was the calm before the storm, a moment of absolute presence, where skill, legacy, and awareness merged into a still point in time. No one moved. No one breathed louder than the others. The air hung heavy, waiting. Then, with the tiniest shift, she subtly shifted into stance, not attacking, not defensive, just ready. And in that posture, the room collectively understood what was about to unfold would rewrite perception entirely. Isla's eyes scanned Tyson again, not searching for weakness but observing. Every twitch of his fingers, every flicker of the jaw, every micro shift of weight told a story. She didn't flinch, didn't blink faster, didn't give him reason to think she was anxious. Her presence alone began to dictate the rhythm of the room. Tyson shifted, trying to mask his growing unease. He adjusted his stance, leaning slightly forward, forcing confidence into his posture. But Isla's gaze didn't waver. Her spine straightened imperceptibly, shoulders relaxed, hands hovering loosely near her belt, ready, yet restrained. Each small detail radiated discipline. A bead of sweat formed at her temple, but it was barely noticeable. Not from exertion, but from awareness, the mental calculation of space, timing, and consequence. Each breath she took was measured, silent, almost ceremonial. Calder and Wexler observed from the sidelines, subtle nods exchanged. They recognized the cues, posture, micro-shifts, and the silence between movements. This was a practiced calm, not the nervous stillness of a child intimidated. A seasoned veteran would move like this, careful, precise, controlled. Tyson's movements became faster, sharper, less natural. He threw a quick jab into the air, a test. Isla's hand met his wrist, redirecting it with barely an audible click. No sound of struggle, no dramatic force. Yet the shift in momentum was unmistakable. Tyson's arm moved like water around an unseen rock, subtly denied its intention. A murmur ran through the room. Even parents, who didn't know martial arts, could sense the authority she commanded without speaking or acting aggressively. Her braid swung lightly as she adjusted her footing, just enough to hint at readiness. A slight lean of her weight back, and the pressure in the room intensified. Time seemed to stretch, each second drawing attention to the minutiae, a flex of a wrist, the tilt of an ankle, a barely perceptible shift in gaze. Liam whispered again, near Evan. "This isn't normal. She's trained for something else entirely." Evan swallowed. He had never seen anyone this young hold a room with mere presence. Not teachers, not black belts, not even Calder's own senior students. Isla's gaze flicked toward the dog tags tucked under her GI. They caught the fluorescent light for an instant, a glimmer of history and legacy hidden beneath the ordinary. That brief flash was enough to make Liam's stomach tighten, a quiet signal that there was more than skill here. There was inheritance, memory, discipline, and a standard of excellence carried silently. The parents shifted in their seats. Even distant conversations had stopped. Every eye in the room was on the mat, on the space between them. The tension was tactile. You could see it in Tyson's tightening fists, in the subtle inhalations of every witness, in the stillness of the black belts forming a living circle around them. Then, without warning, Isla shifted her stance. Not forward, not attacking, but positioning. A subtle pivot, a slight lowering of her center of gravity. The movement was almost invisible to the untrained eye, yet the room collectively recognized it. This is her readiness. The moment has arrived. Her eyes met Tyson's with calm certainty. The storm was near. Time slowed even further. The hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed to fade to a whisper. Each spectator's heartbeat echoed against the polished wooden floor. Isla's small frame held an almost impossible stillness, yet the tension radiating from her posture suggested that, at any instant, she could become motion itself. She pivoted on her toes, bringing her feet into a low, balanced stance. Not aggressive, not defensive, precise. Every muscle aligned, every angle calculated. The black belt around her waist, normally an emblem of rank, now felt like a marker of something far deeper: heritage, discipline, inherited skill. Tyson's bravado faltered. His chest rose and fell too quickly. His fists twitched. He tried to mask it with a forced smile, a quick step forward. Isla's eyes tracked the movement with absolute focus. There was no rush, no flinch, no wasted effort, only awareness. Calder's breath caught. He had watched countless students grow through the ranks, but he had rarely seen someone command a room with silence alone. There was history in Isla's stance, a lineage of precision, control, and restraint. He glanced at Wexler, who gave a subtle nod. Both men instinctively recognized the signs. This was not play. This was mastery waiting to assert itself. The parents in the back shifted uncomfortably. One whispered, She's different from the other kids." Evan and Liam exchanged a look. Liam's voice was barely audible. "It's like her grandfather is standing here through her." The mat seemed to shrink around Isla, drawing Tyson into an invisible current. She did not move first, yet the space between them was charged. Every flicker of muscle, every blink of her eye, every micro-adjustment in stance spoke volumes. This was controlled potential, an unspoken warning, a demonstration that she had already anticipated every possible reaction. Isla's hand twitched toward the knot of her belt, a subtle habit inherited from years of rigorous practice. Her posture shifted slightly, hips squared, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward. The tiniest adjustment, yet it resonated through the room. Tyson's attempt at a taunt died in his throat. His confidence faltered, replaced by a creeping awareness that he had misjudged her entirely. A faint ripple went through the crowd. Calder's eyes lingered on Isla's dog tags, the barely visible scar on her wrist, the determined set of her jaw. These details whispered a story her silence could not yet tell, a history of discipline, service, and sacrifice hidden beneath a child's appearance. The room became a silent audience to an invisible tension. No one dared breathe too loudly. Even the black belts, who had laughed moments before, now felt an inexplicable caution. They began to realize the stakes were no longer trivial. Isla's gaze returned to Tyson. No words were spoken. Her stance was invitation and warning simultaneously. She carried the weight of legacy with grace, neither boastful nor threatening, simply prepared. And then, almost imperceptibly, she shifted her weight slightly forward, knees bending, eyes narrowing. A subtle, deliberate, and undeniable signal. She was ready, not to strike, not to dominate, but to reveal the truth of her ability. In that instant, the room collectively recognized it. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The calm before the storm had reached its apex. The room held its breath. Every eye was fixed on Isla and Tyson, the two figures at the center of the mat. Time stretched, each second drawn taut, like the pause before a storm breaks. Isla's eyes flicked briefly toward the corner, where a familiar figure now appeared. Her uncle, a man whose presence alone carried weight. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple black GI, the kind worn by masters who had long since retired from spectacle but not from vigilance. His expression was calm, unreadable, yet the room instinctively sensed the authority he radiated. Tyson, sensing the shift in the air, took a hesitant step forward. His earlier bravado wavered, replaced by a cautious awareness. The laughter that had filled the room earlier was gone, swallowed by the gravity of the moment. He glanced around and noticed for the first time the stillness in the black belts who had once mocked him. Even Calder and Wexler now watched with subtle, controlled attention. Isla's hand remained near her belt, posture perfect, shoulders squared. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, but it carried the weight of history and preparation. She did not move first. She did not need to. The room seemed to hold itself in anticipation of her next breath. Her uncle stepped closer, slow and deliberate. No theatrics, no rush, just a precise, measured approach that demanded attention. The subtle thrum of power in his steps, the history etched into the lines of his face, reminded everyone that some battles were won before the first strike, through presence alone. Then, almost imperceptibly, Isla shifted her stance. It was a minor adjustment, but it sent a clear signal. She was no longer the underestimated child. Every muscle aligned, every angle optimized for balance and control. Tyson froze. The arrogance that had fueled his mockery faltered under the weight of what he now perceived. This was not play. This was inheritance made flesh. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, though it was not the heat. It was realization. The girl he had dismissed was not just skilled. She was a champion, molded by years of disciplined training and an unspoken legacy. He tried to recover, forcing a smile, but the room didn't respond. Silence had become absolute, a canvas for the storm that was about to break. The first subtle movement came not from Isla, but from her uncle. In one fluid motion, he positioned himself behind Tyson, hands raised, a controlled, precise barrier. There was no aggression, only an unmistakable assertion of protection and authority. The message was clear. The child standing before him carried not just skill, but heritage that demanded respect. Tyson's mouth opened to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He glanced at the parents, the black belts, the other students. Every face mirrored his shock. Every laugh he had thrown moments ago now seemed painfully misplaced. And Isla, still calm, allowed the silence to speak for her. She didn't boast. She didn't move to strike. She simply stood, small but unwavering, presence amplified by the quiet authority of her uncle. In that moment, the first realization spread through the room. She was no ordinary student. She was a master in miniature, and her public humiliation had been a mistake the weight of which was now undeniable. Tyson's chest heaved, a futile attempt to reclaim composure. He shifted his weight, looking for an opening, for any hint that the situation could still be controlled by him. But the room had shifted. The subtle authority of Isla's uncle, combined with her unwavering presence, had transformed the dynamics entirely. The once dismissive black belts and students now watched with a mixture of caution and disbelief. Isla's small hand moved slightly, brushing against her belt. A habitual, almost unconscious motion, but every eye saw it as a prelude, a signal of capability. Her uncle remained behind her, a silent sentinel, ready to intervene yet allowing her space to assert herself. The quiet power radiating from both of them filled the room, replacing laughter with an almost tangible reverence. A hush fell over the crowd as Calder, standing near the wall, leaned slightly forward. He whispered to Wexler, his voice barely audible over the tension. She's not just a black belt. Look at her stance, her control, the way she carries herself. This isn't a child play-acting mastery. This is real. Wexler's eyes widened, and he nodded slowly. Even he, a veteran instructor with decades of experience, recognized the difference between practice and innate precision. Tyson, now fully aware of his miscalculation, took another step, this one more hesitant. He tried to regain dominance through posture and intimidation, but every movement was countered by the subtle yet undeniable alignment of Isla's stance. Her balance was absolute, her focus unshakable, every muscle ready, but no motion initiated, a poised warning that she could act with devastating precision if necessary. Then, in one smooth, measured motion, her uncle shifted his position. He blocked Tyson's path to her without effort, hands outstretched in perfect control, stopping any advance before it began. There was no flourish, no spectacle, just flawless timing and presence. The demonstration of skill and protection was enough to silence any lingering doubt in the room. Parents, students, and instructors alike instinctively took a step back, giving space and respect. Isla remained calm, her blue eyes locked on Tyson. She spoke quietly, yet her words carried weight beyond her years. "It ends now. When we're done, you'll apologize." Her voice was soft, measured, but layered with authority. No threat, no malice, simply a statement of fact, and the room recognized it instantly. Tyson swallowed, his face pale, fumbling for a retort. He was no longer in control. Every ounce of arrogance drained away. The realization hit him fully. The little girl he had mocked, dismissed, and tried to humiliate was not only capable of defending herself, but carried a legacy of skill and discipline that far surpassed his assumptions. Around them, the room held absolute stillness. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim in acknowledgement of the moment. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint shuffle of feet as observers instinctively repositioned themselves, giving deference to the presence now commanding the mat. And then, almost imperceptibly, Isla shifted her weight again, subtle, precise, fully aware of her surroundings. This tiny movement carried the full weight of anticipation. She was ready, not for violence, not for spectacle, but for the moment when truth would be undeniable. The air was heavy with anticipation, each heartbeat echoing in the silence. Isla's uncle made a small, deliberate shift forward, not an attack, but a positioning that immediately communicated control. Tyson's eyes widened. Instinct screamed at him that the space around the girl he had mocked was no longer his to command. Then, in one seamless motion, her uncle moved. Hands extended, precise, stopping Tyson mid-step before he could advance. There was no struggle, no dramatic flourish. It was a simple, perfectly timed intervention, the kind honed by years of disciplined training and experience in high-stakes situations. Tyson's momentum faltered. His stance collapsed subtly, yet unmistakably, leaving him disoriented and humbled in front of the room. Isla herself remained a picture of quiet composure. She didn't move to strike, didn't raise a hand. Her presence alone, the calm emanating from her, conveyed a mastery that words could never capture. The room, previously filled with laughter and derision, now held absolute stillness. Parents, students, and black belts alike could feel the weight of her lineage, the silent proof of her skill, and the dignity with which she carried it. A gasp broke through from the edge of the crowd. One of the younger students, Emma, whispered to her friend, She's not just good. She's like unstoppable." Their eyes darted between Isla and her uncle, finally comprehending that what they had assumed as a child's black belt training was, in reality, the tip of a legacy forged by years of discipline and service. Tyson stumbled backward, a look of shock and disbelief plastered across his face. He tried to speak, to demand recognition or justify himself, but no words could bridge the chasm between arrogance and reality. He had underestimated not just the girl, but the history and authority that came with her. Isla's uncle stepped slightly aside, allowing her presence to shine without overshadowing her. She adjusted her posture, subtle and unforced, every motion deliberate. It was enough to tell the entire room. She was in control, and the humiliation he had attempted to inflict would not stand. Then, as the final layer of realization settled in, parents and students exchanged glances, a dawning recognition spreading across the gym. This wasn't simply a talented child. This was a young champion, inheriting a legacy that had demanded respect long before today. The authority in her eyes, the quiet confidence in her stance, and the unwavering composure of her uncle had combined to render any previous mockery irrelevant. Even Calder and Wexler, seasoned black belts who prided themselves on assessing skill quickly, now stood rigid, processing what they had just witnessed. The lesson was clear. True mastery isn't about size, age, or showmanship. It's about presence, discipline, and the quiet power of earned respect. Tyson remained on the mat, shaken, humbled, and defeated, not by brute force, but by the undeniable weight of skill, history, and integrity. The room exhaled collectively, the tension melting into a reverent silence. Isla's gaze softened slightly, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement of the lesson just imparted. The girl who had been laughed at now commanded unspoken admiration, her dignity fully reclaimed. The silence in the gym was palpable. Eyes darted between Isla and her uncle, struggling to reconcile the quiet, blonde girl who had been laughed at with the presence that now dominated the room. Calder, the veteran black belt instructor, finally broke the stillness, his voice low but resonant. That's Margaret Ironhand Lennox's granddaughter. The words landed like a strike. Parents froze mid-breath, students gaped, and even seasoned black belts exchanged incredulous glances. The room hummed with recognition as fragments of memory surfaced. Old photos of Lennox demonstrating flawless technique, newspaper clippings detailing her legendary championships, stories of her discipline and precision. Emma whispered to her friend, voice trembling, "Granddaughter of her?" Her awe mirrored that of the adults, whose faces slowly shifted from confusion to respect. Wexler's expression went pale. He had sparred with Lennox decades ago and now understood the lineage before him. Tyson, still on the mat, shook his head. "No, she's just a kid." His protests sounded weak, hollow, drowned out by the weight of undeniable reality. Every subtle movement, every measured glance Isla had made now screamed of mastery passed down through generations. Calder stepped closer, addressing the room with quiet authority. "What you've witnessed isn't just skill. It's heritage, discipline refined over generations. The calm, the precision, the dignity, that is the mark of a master." Isla's only response was a faint nod toward her uncle, a quiet acknowledgement of guidance and shared legacy. The atmosphere shifted completely. Derision transformed into reverence, mockery into awe. Tyson's face was a study in disbelief. He had underestimated not a child, but the living embodiment of a legendary legacy. A cluster of parents approached cautiously, offering quiet congratulations, while students whispered among themselves, their admiration growing with each passing second. The faded photo of Margaret Lennox on the gym wall caught the light. Arms folded, eyes sharp, stance perfect, and the room collectively understood. Islam mirrored it perfectly, the same presence, the same precision, now alive in a new generation. Finally, Tyson muttered a broken apology. I'm sorry. Words were insufficient. The truth of skill and heritage had spoken far louder. The room remained hushed, a reverent silence honoring not just victory, but recognition, dignity, and legacy. 3 months later, the gym had a subtle but unmistakable shift. Posters of past champions were complemented by photographs of Isla demonstrating precise techniques, not in competition, but in teaching younger students. Her blonde hair tied back in a simple braid, she moved among the kids with a quiet authority, correcting a stance here, demonstrating balance there, always patient, always composed. The same calm presence that had silenced mockery now nurtured respect and curiosity. Tyson was still around, though his posture had changed. No longer the arrogant, mocking figure, he observed quietly, taking notes and following instructions with humility. He never mocked again. On rare occasions, he glanced toward Isla, and in those moments, there was a flicker of genuine admiration, acknowledgement of the lessons learned, the dignity reclaimed. Isla's uncle watched from the doorway, pride tempered with quiet satisfaction. The protective intervention of that day had not been about dominance. It had been about preserving honor, about teaching a young girl to claim her space without unnecessary confrontation. Now, watching her mentor others, he saw the full circle of that lesson realized. Parents lingered after classes, speaking softly with instructors, recounting the events of that fateful day. Their voices, once filled with disbelief, now carried reverence. The story of the little girl who had been laughed at, the granddaughter of Margaret Ironhand Lennox, became a quiet legend of the gym. It was no longer about spectacle, but about the enduring truth. Mastery, humility, and dignity command respect. One afternoon, as Isla adjusted a young student's grip, she caught a reflection in the mirrored wall. Her stance mirrored her grandmother's, precise and unshakable. She smiled faintly, not in triumph, but in recognition of what she carried, of the legacy she honored through discipline and quiet presence. The humiliation of that day was a distant memory, replaced by something far stronger, self-respect and acknowledgement earned, not demanded. Calder approached, handing her a small, folded certificate of achievement. "You're not just teaching moves," he said softly. "You're teaching history, honor, and strength." Isla accepted it with a slight nod, the corners of her lips hinting at the faintest smile. The room felt alive with the quiet power of legacy fulfilled. And in that moment, the central truth was reaffirmed. Respect is reclaimed not through noise or spectacle, but through skill, presence, and unwavering dignity. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive stories.